Okay, so if we can welcome Sophie Rowe, Befriending Prisoners, Resisting Research Bias with a Prison Sample. Thank you. Okay, just clip it on there if you like.
Okay. Hello, I'm Sophie Rowe. I'm from the Faculty of Education, Law and Social Sciences. Started my PhD 2 months ago, so I'm kind of brainstorming some of my own ideas with you here today. Basically what I'm doing is I'm doing a 10-year reconviction study of prisoners supported by community volunteers. To put this into context, almost half of adult prisoners are reconvicted within a year of release. So tackling reoffending is therefore a really high priority in the criminal justice policy. Despite this, there's relatively little empirical research or theoretical conceptualisation into the reasons behind why people actually decide to leave crime. Criminologists are largely focused on looking into the causes of crime and the escalation of crime, as opposed to looking at the reasons why people leave crime. So this is something that I'm really interested in. My particular research project is looking to extend knowledge in this area of desistance, so the process of leaving crime behind, by exploring the impact of a national prisoner befriending scheme on the desistance from crime. So any research takes place within a political landscape and can have political consequences, whether this is directly sought or considered irrelevant. However, the search for truth can still take place, provided that political goals do not override this search and a strong empirical base is used. So this is something that I am doing in terms of resisting research bias within my research. I'm trying to use a really strong empirical database set, a large database set from those that have been befriended, in order to avoid research bias. So this particular study comes at a time when the government is attempting to balance high levels of imprisonment with a rehabilitation revolution. The Prime Minister's speech from the Centre for Social Justice in October 2012 reiterated the need for rehabilitation and integration into the community to begin within the prison, with a particular focus on using voluntary organisations and them taking on a key role. As part of these plans, Justice Secretary Chris Grayling has outlined a prison mentoring plan whereby offenders are met on the prison gates by a mentor. This idea has attracted large public interest and concern. We've had senior members of the probation service criticising the plans as untried and untested, and this is what my PhD is hoping to look into. It's anticipated that the findings from my research will support the government plans to extend the role of voluntary organisations in the rehabilitative process. So in order to do this, I have access to an organisation that I work alongside called the Newbridge Foundation. Some of you might be familiar with. We do have the business development team do work alongside them at the moment, and we've run a course with them this year. Set up in 1956 by Lord Longford, who actually started befriending Myra Hindley at the time through a letter-writing organisation. And this is a prime example of a voluntary organisation that provides such support as through the gate mentoring. This befriending service puts men and women in prisons and secure hospitals in England and Wales in touch with trained community volunteers who write to and visit offenders. So just to tell you a little bit about how I kind of got involved with Newbridge. I myself for the last 5 years have worked as a volunteer for the Newbridge Foundation. So the last 5 years I have supported prisoners myself, writing letters and visiting every other month. I've befriended attempted murderers, rapists, people in for GBH, false imprisonment, and I will spend, last Monday I spent a good proportion of the day writing letters and Christmas cards to these prisoners. I'm also researching this area as well, so there is a definite tension there. Also, in the last 2 years, I've become group chair of the Birmingham support group. There's no other support group in the Midlands, so we get people from Wales coming, Coventry, all over, and anyone can get involved with Newbridge, and they come along, and every month we meet to discuss concerns that have arisen out of the letters or the visits that we want to talk in a safe environment. In 2012, I conducted the first service evaluation for Newbridge, so I have been involved with them in that respect as well. So while some study designs are more prone to bias, it is present. It's always present. It's very difficult or impossible to completely eliminate bias. However, I have noticed through looking through the literature that it seems that accusations of bias are disproportionately directed at those who study or privilege offenders. I'm sure a lot of you in this room perhaps, or would rather give money to a charity to fend perhaps donkeys than you would to go towards prisoners' welfare. It's a very hard task to reach out for in terms of funding for these particular organisations. And in terms of being critiqued for bias, it does seem to be kind of the target in this area of research. So it's something that I, through my PhD journey, I'm looking to really address so that's covered within my thesis. So something that perhaps you want to consider as well, does acquiring sympathy for those worlds we study undermine or add to our professional integrity? I suppose it depends on how this influences our behaviour and where the boundaries lie. So for the interviewing processes in particular, empathy is really important to have. But can we be too sympathetic, partial, or even might we be going native, as they say? So this is perhaps the central problem in social research, managing the tension between participation and objectivity, how to be in but not of the world we are studying. So do feelings of affection, identification, friendship and trust belong in the research world? These are all kind of themes that come out of befriending, but do they belong in the research world? There is a link between openness, warmth, devotion to the task, the capacity to be sympathetic, and the depth at which research processes operate. I suppose the question is what happens next, and how the data is handled is another matter, requiring kind of a further step back and distance in that respect. So my research design, still, like I say, I'm still early on in terms of that, but I mean in terms of trying to get rid of the research bias, what I'm hoping to adopt is a mixed methods. So my study is going to contribute to knowledge on desistance by presenting statistical evidence, as well as insights from the experiences of the desisting to help inform criminal justice efforts to reduce reoffending. So I'm hoping that the data set will speak for itself. Newbridge have given me access to their data, which dates back from 2003. That's when they've had their data officially started through computer-based system. So I'm looking to assess the effectiveness of befriending by examining the reconviction studies. So this is a Home Office, a national, standard that's set. So I'm hoping to do this by looking at over 1,000 prisoners who were befriended by a community member between 2003 and 2013. And this will be known as the Befriending Group. So I've also got a control group of offenders that have applied for a befriender but were never matched. So this might be because the bureaucracy within the prisons, that the paperwork's never got signed off, that they've actually left on parole before they were able to be matched, or that they've actually decided they don't want a befriender. So I've got the control group of those individuals, and it seems to be an ideal comparison group. Because they were in need of support at the time, and the people that are generally applying for the befrienders are coming from quite high risk kind of backgrounds, in the sense that a lot of the offences are very serious. They've lost contact with their communities and families, and therefore they're applying for the befriender. So I'm hoping to demonstrate by statistical test that this that the findings and interpretations are credible, basically. Researchers are increasingly relying on large data sets. So in recent years, there's been an argument that's been made that obtaining informed consent for conducting records-based research is unduly burdensome and results in consent bias. So this is something that I'm hoping to avoid by encompassing all those individuals that have actually requested a befriender. I'm not ruling anyone out. I'm not asking people for consent to use it. I'm using a record base that's been come through Newbridge. So in doing that, I'm hoping to get rid of selection bias, so consent bias, when the group giving researchers access to their data differs from the group denying it. So by including everyone in the research, I hope to eliminate, the bias that might come out of some people deciding to opt out from having that information shared. So therefore, to promote social beneficial research, I'm arguing that consent should be unnecessary for large record-based research. Like I say, I've only been into my PhD like 2 months now, so if anyone is in the situation where you're researching people or organisations or absolutely anything where you're actually working alongside them as well as studying them, I'm really interested to speak to you in the break or in future about how you're actually managing that in terms of balancing your participation with that organisation or people and the objectivity within your research as well. So thank you.